The lawyer's hand was shaking when he slid the folder across the desk toward me. Not trembling. Shaking. Like he'd picked up something he wasn't supposed to touch. I remember staring at that folder for a moment before I opened it. Brown cardboard, a little worn at the corners. My name printed on the label tab. Nothing about it looked dangerous. Nothing about it looked like the thing that was about to collapse the last 30 years of my life into a pile of rubble. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Robert. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer for the county, mostly roads and drainage systems. The kind of work nobody thinks about until something floods. I retired 4 years ago. My wife Helen passed away 6 years back from pancreatic cancer. 8 months. That's all we got from the diagnosis to the end. 8 months. After she was gone, it was just me in the house in Clarksville, Tennessee. 3 bedrooms, a backyard that needed more attention than I gave it, and a silence I never quite got used to. My daughter, Renee, lived about 40 minutes away in Nashville. She called every Sunday, came by on holidays, brought her husband along when she could. His name was Philip. They'd been married 5 years by the time any of this happened. I never had strong feelings about Philip either way. He was quiet, a little distant, always seemed to be thinking about something else when you talked to him. But he treated Renee well, or so I thought, and that was enough for me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was that Philip had been doing the math on my life insurance policy for the better part of a year. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I was supposed to drive to Nashville to drop off some boxes of Helen's things that Renee had asked for. Old photo albums, some of her mother's jewelry, a quilt her grandmother had made. Things with meaning. I'd been putting it off because every time I opened those boxes I had to sit down for a while before I could close them again. I loaded the car around noon and called Renee to let her know I was coming. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail, figured she was at work, and pulled out of the driveway. About 15 minutes down I-24, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Robert?" A woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. "Yes." "Mr. Robert, this is calling from Vanderbilt Medical. We have a patient here who listed you as an emergency contact. Your daughter, Renee." I pulled onto the shoulder without even thinking about it. Cars blurred past me. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She was brought in about 30 minutes ago. I'm not able to share details over the phone, but we'd like you to come in." I don't remember much of the drive after that. I know I got off at the wrong exit and had to correct myself. I know I called Renee's number 3 more times and got voicemail every time. I know I was doing about 80 on a stretch of road where the limit was 65, and I didn't care. When I got close to the medical center and stopped at a light, I realized I hadn't eaten anything since morning and my mouth was completely dry. I pulled into a gas station on Charlotte Avenue just to grab a bottle of water. I left the car running, ran inside, grabbed a water from the cooler, left cash on the counter, and jogged back out. I was already back behind the wheel, cap off, drinking when I glanced at the passenger seat. There was an envelope there that I didn't put there. I set the water bottle down. It was a standard business envelope, white, no return address, my name handwritten on the front in a small, careful print I didn't recognize, sealed. I sat there for a second, the light outside going golden through the windshield, cars pulling in and out of the gas station around me, and I thought that was not there when I left the house. I was almost certain of it. I thought back through the morning. I'd loaded the car alone, locked up the house, gotten in the driver's side. No stops. No one had come near the car. The only time I hadn't been watching it was those 2 minutes inside the gas station. Someone had put this envelope in my car while I was inside. I looked through the windshield. The parking lot was ordinary. A minivan, a pickup truck, a young woman with a stroller heading into the store. Nobody watching me. Nobody running. I almost put the car in drive and kept going. I had a daughter in a hospital and that mattered more than a misdelivered envelope, but my name was on it. And the handwriting had a quality to it I couldn't explain. Deliberate. Like someone had written it slowly, carefully, wanting to make sure I could read it. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. folded in thirds. I unfolded it and read it standing beside my car. Robert, do not go to the hospital. Renee is not there. This is a setup. There is a document at your house that has already been filed. Check the fireproof box in your closet. The papers inside are not the ones you put there. I'm sorry I can't tell you more. Please be careful. That was all. No signature. I read it 3 times. Then I got back in the car, sat there with the engine idling and tried to think clearly. My first reaction was that this was wrong. Renee could actually be hurt. People didn't fake emergencies. Hospitals didn't make up calls. I should keep driving. My second reaction came about 30 seconds later, quieter and colder. The call had come from an unknown number. The hospital hadn't given me any information, and Renee hadn't called me herself. I called Renee again. This time she picked up on the second ring. Dad? Hey, what's up? She sounded fine. A little distracted. Background noise of an office. Where are you right now? I said. At work. Why? Did something happen? I closed my eyes. No, I said. I'm going to be a little late with those boxes. I'll explain later. I hung up and turned the car around. The fireproof box had been in my bedroom closet for 11 years. Grey, about the size of a shoebox, combination lock. Helen and I had bought it after a neighbour's house fire. Inside, both our wills, the deed to the house, my life insurance policy, some bonds, the titles to the cars. I didn't run inside when I got home. I made myself walk. I needed to think. I'd been gone less than 2 hours. The house was locked. I have a deadbolt on the front door and a keyed lock on the back. Both were still locked when I let myself in. I went straight to the closet, pulled the box from the shelf and set it on the bed. I opened it. Everything looked the same at first. The folders were in order, the bonds where I'd left them. I pulled out the life insurance folder and opened it. The policy document was there. Same header, same policy number at the top. I almost closed it. But then I looked at the beneficiary line. Helen's name had been there since 2003. When she died, I'd updated it to Renee, 50%, and a charitable remainder to our church, 50%. The beneficiary line now read Renee Collins and Philip Collins, jointly 100%, and below it my signature. Except I had never signed that page. I had never changed that beneficiary designation. And I'd never, not once in my life, written my signature the way it appeared on that line. My hands were not steady when I set the document down on the bed. I sat there for a long time. I am not the dramatic man. I spent 3 decades calculating load tolerances and drainage grades. I like evidence. I like things that can be measured. And what I was looking at was evidence. I just didn't know yet what it proved, or how far it went. The anonymous note said the document had already been filed. That was the part that made my stomach drop. Because if someone had submitted a forged beneficiary change to the insurance company, there might be a window to contest it, but that window was not unlimited. I needed help. I didn't have. I picked up the phone and called the one person I could think of, my old friend Dwight, who'd retired from the county prosecutor's office 8 years ago. We went to the same church. I trusted him completely. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I told him what I had in front of me. I told him about the phone call, the envelope at the gas station, the document in the box. He was quiet for a moment. Don't touch anything else in that box, he said. Don't call Renee yet. Don't call your insurance company yet. You need to come to me first. Can you do that? Right now. Right now. Dwight had a home office in his place in Brentwood, bookshelves full to ceiling, a desk that had been in his family since the 50s. He put on reading glasses and looked at the document for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "Who has access to your home?" "Renee has a key. Philip does too, by extension." "Anyone else?" "My neighbour has one. Emergency spare. She's 81. She's not involved in anything." He nodded slowly. "This signature has been photocopied and repasted. You can see it if you hold it at an angle." He tilted the document under his desk lamp. "The ink pattern doesn't match the paper texture. Somebody cut your signature from another document and reproduced it here. Or they scanned it and printed it. Either way, it's a forgery. The note said it's already been filed, which means someone submitted this to your insurance carrier as a legitimate change of beneficiary. He took off his glasses. Robert, if you were to pass away before this was caught and corrected, the full death benefit would go to your daughter and son-in-law jointly. No charitable remainder. No church. And whoever submitted this form knew that. I had been holding myself together up to that point. How much is the policy? He asked. $750,000. Dwight was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said finally. Here's what we do. What we did was careful, and it took 3 weeks. Dwight knew a contact at the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, which oversees insurance fraud in the state. He also called a friend at the county sheriff's office, not to file a complaint yet, but to have a quiet conversation about what evidence would be needed if it ever came to that. The insurance carrier was contacted through proper channels. The submitted change of beneficiary form was pulled and examined. Dwight's instinct was right. The signature had been digitally reproduced. A forensic document examiner confirmed it within a week. What they couldn't confirm yet was who had submitted it. The form had been mailed. Postmarked Nashville. That narrowed it but proved nothing. During those 3 weeks I kept everything normal. I called Renee on Sunday. I didn't go over for dinner the following weekend, said I wasn't feeling well, which was close enough to the truth. I thought about Philip, his quietness, the way he always seemed to be running calculations behind his eyes. And I wondered how long he'd been thinking about this. I wondered if Renee knew. That question kept me up more than anything else. The answer came from a source I didn't expect. 10 days into the investigation, the insurance fraud unit had been quietly reviewing submission records. They found that the forged form had been submitted via certified mail, traceable. The sender's name on the postal receipt was false, but the handwriting on the mailing label matched samples from a document Philip had signed at the title company when they bought their house. That was enough for a warrant. What the warrant turned up was worse than I'd imagined. On Philip's laptop, which he'd apparently never considered might be searched, investigators found a search history going back 14 months. He had researched Tennessee life insurance fraud statutes. He had researched how long beneficiary changes take to process. He had looked up my policy carrier by name. He had searched on 4 separate occasions information about the health risks associated with my blood pressure medication, apparently trying to understand a natural timeline. He had also 8 months earlier searched, how long does accidental death investigation take for life insurance payout? He wasn't just stealing from me on paper. He'd been thinking about more than that. I don't have words for what it feels like to read that. I sat in Dwight's office while a sheriff's deputy walked me through the printouts, and I didn't say anything for a long time. The room felt very small. I thought about Helen. I thought about Helen. I thought about the Sunday dinners. I thought about helping Philip and Renee move into their apartment before they bought the house, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, all of us laughing about it afterward. I thought about how completely I'd misread a person. What I still didn't know was whether Renee was part of it. I asked Dwight that directly, and he said, based on what they had so far, there was no evidence her name appeared anywhere in the digital trail. No emails. No searches on her devices. No calls between her number and the postal service or insurance company. That doesn't mean she knew nothing, he said carefully, but it means there's nothing pointing at her. I chose to believe it. Maybe I needed to. They arrested Philip on a Thursday morning. He was at work. He managed a logistics warehouse on the east side of Nashville when 2 sheriff's deputies and an insurance fraud investigator walked in. His supervisor let them use a conference room. I don't know exactly what was said in that room, but I know that Philip did not ask for a lawyer for the first 40 minutes, which Dwight told me later was when people say things they shouldn't. Renee called me that afternoon. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. I pulled off the road. I was driving nowhere in particular. I'd been driving all morning to have something to do with my hands, and I sat on the shoulder and listened to my daughter fall apart on the phone. She said she hadn't known. She said she was sorry. She said it over and over. I'm sorry, I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know. I believed her. I don't know if that makes me foolish or faithful. Maybe both. But I listened to her voice and I believed her. and I told her I wasn't angry at her, and that was the truth. I was angry. I just wasn't angry at her. The investigation widened a little in the weeks that followed because once investigators started looking, they found that Philip had also opened a credit card in my name. 18 months earlier, the balance on it was $11,000. Furniture, tools, a weekend trip to Gatlinburg that I certainly wasn't on. He'd used a change of address redirect on my mail for about 90 days to keep the statements from reaching me, then cancelled it. Sloppy. Or maybe he'd assumed I wouldn't look closely. I hadn't looked closely. That's the truth of it. I'm a widower who trusts his family and doesn't audit his credit report every month. I paid my bills, kept my accounts in order, and didn't imagine I needed to be watching for someone operating quietly in the margins of my financial life. That was my mistake. I don't make it anymore. Philip was charged with insurance fraud, forgery of a legal document, and identity theft. 3 separate charges. His attorney tried to negotiate a plea that would have kept him out of prison, arguing that the insurance fraud had been unsuccessful, and therefore no financial harm occurred. The judge disagreed. Tennessee takes insurance fraud seriously. So does identity theft. Philip was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, eligible for parole after serving 2. He also had to pay full restitution on the credit card debt and a significant civil penalty. I wasn't in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Dwight offered to go with me and I told him no. I didn't want to sit in a room and watch Philip's face and feel whatever I was going to feel. I wanted it to be over. Dwight texted me from the courtroom. 4 years. It's done. I was sitting in my backyard when I got that message. Late afternoon, early spring, the kind of Tennessee evening where the light goes sideways through the trees and everything turns gold for about 20 minutes before it gets dark. I'd been doing nothing, just sitting. I read the message twice. Set the phone down on the arm of the chair. Looked at the yard. Renee and Philip divorced while he was awaiting trial. She filed the papers herself. She told me it was not a hard decision, which I believed, but I also know that nothing about it was easy. She comes by more often now. Sometimes we sit in their backyard together and talk about her mother, or about nothing in particular, and I watch her face and I'm glad she's there. I'm glad I still have her. There were weeks in all of this when I wasn't sure what I was going to have left on the other side of it. She asked me once who had sent the note at the gas station. The one that turned me around, that started everything. I told her I didn't know. That was the truth. I still don't know. The investigators looked into it briefly and found nothing. No prints. The envelope was common stock, sold at any office supply store in the country. Whoever wrote it had been careful. I had my guesses. One person in particular comes to mind when I think about it. Someone who might have known what Philip was doing and found they couldn't stay silent, but also couldn't step forward directly. I'll never be sure, and I've made a kind of peace with not being sure. What I know is that a stranger, or someone who might as well have been a stranger to me, made a decision to stop and write something down and put it in my hands at the right moment. That decision costs them something. Courage usually does. I updated the beneficiary on my life insurance policy the week after the fraud was discovered. It goes to Renee now, 50%, and the remaining 50% to a scholarship fund at the community college here in Clarksville. Something Helen always wanted to support, but we never got around to formalizing. I had a proper attorney review everything. I have a different lock on my front door. I check my credit report every 3 months. Small things. Practical things. The kind you do when you've learned later than you should have, that love and trust, even when they're real, are not the same as being careful. I still sleep in the same bedroom, still drive the same car, still have coffee on the back porch when the weather's good. My life didn't change in the ways that mattered. But I'm not the same man who loaded those boxes into his car on a Tuesday afternoon in October, easy in the assumption that the people close to him could be trusted without question. I gave my daughter and her husband a place at my table for 5 years. I lent them money I told myself was a gift. I carried boxes up their stairs and laughed about the broken elevator. What I have learned, and I say this not with bitterness, but with the kind of clarity that only comes from being shaken all the way down to your foundation, is that love is not a guarantee of loyalty. And being a good man to someone does not protect you from what they're capable of when they decide that what you have is worth more to them than who you are. I am 67 years old. I have outlived my wife. I have survived my son-in-law's scheme and come out the other side with my house, my health, my daughter, and my name intact. That is enough. More than enough. The gold light comes through the backyard trees again this evening, same as it always has. I'm still here to see it. I keep coming back to that envelope on the passenger seat. Someone stopped. Someone took the time to write those words down, seal them up, and place them where I would find them. They didn't sign it. They didn't ask for anything in return. They just did what they knew was right and walked away before I could see their face. I've thought about that act more than I've thought about anything Philip did. Because what Philip did made sense in a terrible, selfish way. He wanted something that wasn't his, and he reached for it. People do that. But what the anonymous writer did made a different kind of sense. The kind that's harder to explain and harder to sustain. The kind that costs you something. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a retired engineer from Clarksville, Tennessee, who used to calculate how much weight a bridge could hold. But I've been doing a different kind of calculation since all of this happened. I've been thinking about what actually holds a life together. Philip was not a stupid man. He researched that scheme for over a year. He understood insurance law well enough to know which forms to forge and how to mail them without a return address. He was patient. He was methodical. But he used every bit of that intelligence in the service of something rotten, and so all that cleverness bought him was 4 years in a state prison and a divorce he didn't see coming. Intelligence without integrity isn't a gift. It's a hazard. To everyone around you and eventually to yourself. I made my own mistakes in this. I trusted without verifying. I assumed that because I loved my family and provided for them, the feeling was mutual in all the ways that mattered. That was not stupidity exactly. It was a kind of willful ease, the comfort of a man who didn't want to look too closely at the people he loved. I understand now that paying attention is not the same as being suspicious. Checking your own accounts, knowing what documents you've signed, understanding where your assets go when you're gone. That's not distrust. That's just being awake. Being awake to your own life. I should have been doing that all along. What got me through the weeks after the discovery was not anger. Anger was there, but it wasn't what kept me moving. What kept me moving was something quieter. A decision made fresh each morning to not let this be the thing that finished me. Dwight showed up. Renee showed up eventually in her own devastated way. The investigator who walked me through those printouts was patient and thorough. The world had not turned entirely against me. I had to stay steady enough to see that. That steadiness, the ability to keep functioning when everything you trusted turns out to have a crack in it, is something you don't find in a book. You find it by doing it. By getting up the next day and making the coffee and calling your daughter and not letting the worst thing that happened to you become the only thing that defines you. I gave my son-in-law 5 years of trust and a place at my table. He gave me a forged signature and a 14-month head start on a plan that could have cost me everything. What I gave myself, finally, was the understanding that I deserved better, and a willingness to act on that understanding before it was too late. That's the thing I want anyone listening to carry with them. Not the crime, not the betrayal, the envelope on the seat, the stranger who stopped, the choice to turn the car around when every instinct told me to keep going. Sometimes the right move is the one that looks like going backward.